Russia meet hell on earth. That's what Ukraine has just delivered to Putin as it rained down long-range strikes that have devastated everything. From Donetsk to Dagestan, Ukraine has delivered a message. We can hit Russian assets anywhere. Nothing is safe. Everything can be destroyed. There's nowhere for Putin to hide his equipment. These strikes are insane, and they can prove that even the republics that are part of Russia but aren't directly involved in Ukraine will be hit if they help Putin too much. To the east of Georgia, and with a coastline on the Caspian Sea, Dagestan is an interesting case. It's a republic of the Russian Federation, but isn't somewhere that Ukraine has traditionally targeted. Whether that was due to lacking the weapons or the inclination up to this point no longer matters. Dagestan just got hit. Or more specifically, a Russian missile corvette in a Dagestani port has been struck by Ukraine's long-range weapons. The General Staff of Ukraine's armed forces delivered the basic details in a telegram post. In the area of the Caspian base, a multi-purpose small missile ship of Project 22800 Karakurt was hit, which in particular has the ability to launch caliber cruise missiles, the report said. The General Staff didn't say much more about the strike than that. We don't know what weapons Ukraine used, though a long-range drone or missile hybrid like the Neptune or Flamingo seems like the most likely candidate. But frankly, Ukraine didn't need to say much more. It was enough to let Russia know that the ship had been hit, and to make sure that Putin couldn't deny it by showcasing photographs of the images caught by Ukraine's drones as they bore down on the ship. Beyond that, Ukraine isn't giving anything else away, and that's smart. But what's even smarter is that Ukraine just took out a missile corvette that isn't part of the Black Sea fleet that Ukraine has spent so much of the war smashing. But it's just as important to Russia because it's a warship that Putin thought was out of range of Ukraine's weapons. The Project 22800 Karakurt is an important class of ships for Russia. According to Defense Express, these types of ships are multi-purpose corvettes that, among other things, are capable of launching caliber cruise missiles that Russia has been using to damage Ukrainian cities for much of the war. The Russian news agency TASS has more details. It reveals that the Karakurt class is among the most modern warships that Russia has in its arsenal. Russia's defense ministry only signed the contract for the construction of the first 7 of these ships back in 2015, and the ministry thought that it was getting something special. Each Karakurt comes with a universal naval firing system, TASS reports, and that system includes 8 vertical launch cells that can be used to fire both Caliber and Onyx cruise missiles. A Pantsir M air defense system is installed on each ship. Well, that didn't work out so well, did it, Russia? And on top of that, a Karakurt is supposed to have a portable anti-aircraft missile system and several 76.2mm gun mounts that can also be used to shoot aircraft, missiles, and drones out of the sky. We're telling you all of this for a reason. The Karakurt-class ship that Ukraine struck in Dagestan was far from defenseless. Quite the opposite, in fact, as it was loaded with the sorts of air defense systems that should have stopped Ukraine's attack from happening. It doesn't matter that the ship was in port. Even if Russia's sailors weren't actively manning the defenses, radars on or around the ship should have seen Ukraine's drones coming. This is a humiliation for Putin on multiple fronts. Ukraine's drones have managed to travel far beyond their borders and into the Caspian Sea region to reach Dagestan. They should have been stopped long before, and they weren't. Those drones should have also been detected by Russia's radar systems before they got close to the stricken ship. Again, Russia failed. And then more failure was heaped on top of that as the litany of air defense systems on Russia's missile corvette managed to hit the sum total of nothing, assuming they activated at all. None of this was supposed to happen. But it did, and it has ramifications for Russia beyond Ukraine simply hitting another warship with its drones. Ukraine reports that the damage done to the warship is still being clarified. Assuming Ukraine scored a powerful enough hit to take the ship out of commission, that also means it has reduced Russia's ability to use caliber cruise missiles to launch airstrikes against Ukrainian territory. That's big. The Caliber has been a major threat to Ukraine for some time. These cruise missiles are capable of traveling between 1,500 and 2,500 kilometers, the Missile Defense Advocacy Alliance reports, and they can be launched from land and sea. They carry a conventional warhead weighing 450 kilograms and are also reported to be nuclear capable. That alone is a problem for Ukraine. The fact that Caliber missiles have hit Ukraine many times in the past, as far back as November 2024, when Pravda reported on them being launched from the Black Sea, is amplified by the knowledge that any one of those missiles could contain a nuclear warhead. Don't underestimate the psychological impact that has. Putin is unpredictable and more than happy to throw around nuclear threats. While it's unlikely that he would follow through, as over 4 years of the Ukraine war shows us, there is always a chance. At least there is a chance if Russia's nuclear warhead delivery vehicles can launch. Ukraine believes it's taken one of them out of the equation. Caliber missiles are also dangerous because they can be launched from small warships like the Karakurt class. The smaller the ship, the more likely it is to sail under the radar and the harder it is to hit back. Ukraine just overcame all of that. Somehow it knew where Russia's missile corvette was, and it managed to score at least one direct hit with its drones. It's impressive. It highlights that Ukraine's intelligence network penetrates as deep as its drones, and Putin will be scratching his head trying to figure out what he can do to stop Ukraine from learning so much about Russia's supposedly hidden military assets. He can't do much, but that's the least of Putin's problems. As impressive as Ukraine's strike in Dagestan is, behind it all is a far larger issue that Putin never thought he would have to deal with. The naval battle between Russia and Ukraine is taking a dark, new turn from Russia's perspective. And it means that the Black Sea isn't the only arena that Russia has to worry about. The Caspian Sea is now in the equation, and it's just the start. Everything is changing on the naval front, and this strike is just one example. And that sort of thing is exactly why we make the military show, to explore how power really moves and how battlefields can change when new technology comes to the fore. If you're new to the channel, hit subscribe so you never miss a video. Russia hasn't done well against Ukraine on the naval front. When Putin launched his invasion, the Black Sea was supposed to be Russia's domain. That was an easy assumption to make. The fearsome Black Sea Fleet was supposed to dominate the waterway that gave the fleet its name, especially as Ukraine has no real navy to contend with it. Of course, in 2026, we know that hasn't happened. By March of 2024, about a third of the Black Sea Fleet had been taken out of commission by Ukrainian missile and drone strikes. Today, the balance of power in the Black Sea has changed completely. Russia's fleet is functionally useless, having been reduced to doing little more than launching missile strikes after withdrawing from its headquarters in Sevastopol to Novorossiysk. The Black Sea certainly isn't safe, but it's also not the war-winning passage from illegally occupied Crimea into Ukraine that most assumed it would be. Still, Putin could handle the loss of power in the Black Sea. It wasn't ideal, but Russia can still transport plenty of troops and equipment into Ukraine via other channels. And though the Black Sea Fleet was taking a battering, Putin could at least console himself with the belief that Ukraine wouldn't attack ships outside of the Black Sea. That is all changing, and that is a big problem for Putin. Ukraine certainly hasn't forgotten about the Black Sea. Just a few days before the drones flew into Dagestan, Ukraine struck a pair of Shadow Fleet tankers in Novorossiysk to remind Putin the once mighty Black Sea Fleet has no pull in the Black Sea anymore. But Putin's major issue is that Ukraine has expanded the scope of its naval campaign to the point where it's no longer constrained by a single body of water. Taking out a Russian missile corvette in the Caspian Sea is proof of that, but it's far from the only example of Ukraine's evolving naval strategy. In the last 6 months, Ukraine has been on a long-range tear, taking out Russian warships and Shadow Fleet tankers as it goes. Back in December, Ukraine scored its first hit against a Russian tanker in the Mediterranean Sea, as it caused critical damage to the Kendil in an attack that occurred over 2,000 kilometers away from Ukraine. A few months later, in March, Russia accused Ukrainian drones of sinking a liquefied natural gas tanker in the Mediterranean. The Arctic metagas was struck somewhere between Libya and Malta, and rumors abound that Ukraine has set up several bases in Libya that allow it to counter Putin's attempts to use the Mediterranean for safe passage of his shadow ships. And on May 3rd, another of Russia's Karakurt-class missile ships, along with a patrol boat and yet another Shadow Fleet tanker, were struck in a Ukrainian airstrike at the Primorsk port in the Leningrad region. That's a Baltic Sea port, so it shows that Ukraine is casting its net wider to both the east and the west. We've gotten used to talking about Ukraine taking out ships over and over again, but even we didn't expect to be delivering these reports primarily about vessels that were outside of the Black Sea. Putin didn't expect it either, and he certainly isn't getting to grips with the fact that Ukraine has become a long-range powerhouse that can strike Russian ships anywhere within 2,000 kilometers and sometimes even further from the battlefield of the war that he started. None of Russia's ships are safe anymore. Even when Ukraine doesn't have drones that can strike ships, it's setting up bases in far-flung countries to cut the distance that its drones need to travel. We're seeing the evolution of Ukraine's long-range campaign in real time, as a nation that was once a minnow on the deep strike drone front is now matching Russia step for step. Parity has already been achieved, now Ukraine is taking the lead. But before we dig deeper into that, you didn't think that Ukraine stopped at taking out a missile corvette in Dagestan, did you? Of course, Ukraine had a lot more in the tank. It's become a feature of Ukraine's long-range strikes that they involve taking out multiple targets in a single night, and Ukraine's focus was split between Dagestan and the middle-range ground of the occupied territories. In the Luhansk region, which is part of the Donbass and is a region that Russia has practically captured from Ukraine, the drones were flying. Ukraine's pilots scored a direct hit against a Russian command post in Sosnivka, which will limit Putin's ability to push his troops forward from Luhansk and deeper into the Donbass. Assaults will still happen with that command post taken down. Putin doesn't care about the meat he sends to the slaughter, but those assaults will be uncoordinated and chaotic, making them easy pickings for Ukraine's drone-infested kill zones. Also in Luhansk, Ukraine took out an ammunition depot in Kalmykiivka and a storage facility in Smolyaninovo. We don't know what that facility held, but it was likely supplies that support Russia's logistics and frontline supply chains. The ammo depot likely held artillery shells that Russia uses to batter Ukrainian positions as part of its assaults. So great news for Putin's patsies on the Luhansk front. Command posts are being shattered, and now they don't have the ammo or supplies they need to fire back against Ukraine. We guess that all they have left is to run headfirst into the kill zones. Everybody knows how that will turn out. To complete its devastating series of attacks in the Donbass, Ukraine also took aim at Donetsk. Near the settlement of Yasna, Ukraine's middle-range drones took out a command and control point used by Russia's drone operators. The irony is delicious. Taking out a drone command post using the very type of weapon that the people in that post control is the sort of revenge strike that everybody in Ukraine can get behind. And just for good measure, Ukraine also completed a strike against a concentration of Russian personnel in the Dasova area of Donetsk, as well as in the Zaporizhia region. At least Luhansk has been left with some soldiers for its assaults. Elsewhere in the Donbass, it's soldiers themselves who are being taken out before they even get close to approaching the front lines. Putin's rear is sore. His missile corvette is hit, and the occupied territories are pockmarked with Ukrainian drones. And all of this is emblematic of a new approach to the long-range game that Ukraine instituted in 2026 that has been utterly devastating to Russia. Ukraine's long-range strikes are nothing new. It's been launching drones and missiles into Russia and the occupied territories for years. Going as far as Dagestan and places like the Mediterranean Sea is one of the new aspects that Ukraine has added into the mix, and that is being compounded by the sort of sheer volume that up until 2026, only Russia seemed to be capable of delivering. Ukraine has been expanding on multiple fronts. Its long-range arsenal is now larger and less reliant on Western tech than ever before. Don't get us wrong, Ukraine still receives the likes of Storm Shadows and Attackams, and it will happily use them whenever it has a chance. But a new generation of middle-range drones is making attacks like those we saw in the Donbass possible. An enhanced production of drones and missiles means that Ukraine can now extend its scope, particularly in its naval campaign, into areas far beyond what anybody thought would be possible. David Kirichenko of Forbes says that Ukraine's expanding capabilities may define the next phase of the war as we head deeper into 2026, and it's hard to argue with his point. He points out that Ukraine's Flamingo drone missile hybrid had already struck plenty of targets with precision at distances up to 1,400 kilometers by March, and it's only been going deeper since. What were once long-range strikes carried out using small drones that lacked firepower are now deep attacks carried out by much larger drones that deliver hundreds of kilograms of explosive fury to their targets. The Russian warship in Dagestan just found that out the hard way. And Ukraine's ramping up of its long-range strategy shows us that the nation views precision strikes in the near and deep rear to be the decisive aspect of the war. That's why we're seeing the sort of sustained campaign that leads to Ukraine doing things like taking out a warship in Dagestan while also hitting targets in its own occupied territories. Hit Russia often and hard enough and the cracks will start to show. The military and psychological rewards are already prevalent. In the case of the latter, Putin was so terrified of Ukraine's drones and their potential that he stripped down Russia's May 9th victory parade so that the version running through Moscow's Red Square would contain no military equipment. Putin also begged for a ceasefire, which in itself was an acknowledgement of Ukraine's ability to strike almost any target inside Russia, and many targets outside of the motherland as and when it wants. At the last minute, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky delivered the ultimate insult to Putin by telling him that Ukraine would permit him to hold his little stripped-down parade. Another humiliation to add to the pile for Russia's weakening leader. The numbers now tell the story when it comes to long-range drones. Since August 2024, Ukraine has gone from severely trailing Russia on long-range drone strikes to overtaking its enemy. In that August, Ukraine launched 1,000 drones at military targets. By July 2025, the number had risen to 3,000, triple the strikes carried out almost a year before, but nowhere near the amount of drone attacks that Russia carried out. Then we get to March 2026, and the story becomes Ukraine shooting into the lead. Russia reported downing 7,347 drones in March, while Ukraine said it faced 6,462 Russian drones during the same period. This is a turnaround for the books, and it's the exclamation point on the statement that Ukraine's long-range campaign is bigger, better, and stronger than ever before. Now, from Dagestan to Donetsk, Ukraine's drones are flying. And it's not just that they're flying, they're hitting their targets. Putin is terrified of what that means. The May 9th victory parade is proof of that. And you could even say that Ukraine taking out a missile corvette in Dagestan was just its way of letting Russia's leader know that it could have easily hit Moscow at any point during that parade. Did Putin want his ceasefire? Fine, he can lose a warship and deal with the occupied region getting pelted instead. Ukraine has built the best security guarantee it ever could have had. It just pulled off something insane in Dagestan, and as another of his warships burned, Putin is left to cry over the fact that Ukraine can now hit anything, anywhere that might be important to Russia. There will be no sympathy from Ukraine. Only more drones until Putin finally gets the picture. And due to its evolved deep strike strategy, Ukraine is even forcing Putin to lose his grip on the illegally annexed Crimean Peninsula. Another wave of strikes, which took out everything from radar sites to Iskander missile bases, is reshaping the Crimean battlefield. A ground invasion won't even be needed to liberate Crimea, and you can find out why by checking out our video. And if you enjoyed this video, remember to subscribe to The Military Show to see more of our coverage of how Ukraine keeps on sticking it deep into Russia's rear. And thank you for watching.